Hi, Denise Gwen, reading aloud for you my short story, The Greasy Spoon, Chapter 38. At first, the plan worked. They burst outside through the exit and stood there for a moment looking around them and inhaling the clean, fresh air. "Hey guys," Nick said, pointing to the far left end of the pole barn building, where the front cab of the freight delivery truck peeked out from behind the loading dock. "Let's go that way and ask for help." "You think that's a good idea?" Ed asked. At that moment, 3 figures emerged from behind the parked truck, and someone shouted, "There they are!" "Oh, fuck," Nick said, and turned on his heel and grabbed the girl's hand and ran in the opposite direction with Ed keeping pace beside him. They ran up the length of the pole barn building, and this was bad, for they were an easy target for any one of the farmers who might happen to have a shotgun or a rifle. And the pole barn building was easily a half-mile long. Still, they ran fast, and they were 400 yards away from the end of the building when Nick heard the unmistakable sound of someone ratcheting up a shotgun. "Bend your head down," Nick said, and pressed the girl's head down as they ran and looked over at Ed, and he nodded and bent his head down, and they picked up speed and kept on running. "Stop, you asshole! Stop! We want to talk to you!" one of the farmers yelled. A gunshot rang out. A bullet zinged past Nick's left cheek, and he cried out in pain, and the girl ducked her head, and it was a lucky thing, for if she hadn't, the bullet would have blown her head off, and he winced and kept on running. "Jesus!" Ed shouted. They were reaching the far end of the building. 1 farmer was dead, and the 3 remaining men were after them, so Nick felt pretty sure that someone wouldn't be waiting for them at the end of the pole barn, and so he ran even harder and dragged the girl, and Ed didn't need to be told to run. He passed Nick by, and Nick saw the end of the building approaching. If they could just get to the corner, if they could just get there, they'd reach a measure of safety and a chance to think through their options. A bullet zinged past, then another. Ed was pulling far ahead of Nick and the girl, and as he ran past him, Ed turned his head to smile at Nick. And in that second, his head snapped back into an odd position, and Nick wondered at that. Was Ed turning around to say something to them? And his teeth and tongue erupted from his wide-open mouth, and he dropped to the ground. 1 second, Ed was gazing into Nick's eyes, and there was a hint of exultation in them. And in the next, that same eye was now flying away from Ed's body as his brain matter and bone and teeth erupted from his head and exploded onto Nick's face, covering him in gore and tissue. But he didn't dare brush it off, out of a fear that any movement on his part that wasn't focused on escape might get him shot. He dedicated his last reserves of strength to running and getting away from these men, and now the young woman's life was in danger as well. And at the same moment that Ed's body faltered, Nick kept on running, and he rounded the corner and tore around it on a wild, keening trajectory, and her feet lifted off the ground as he swung her around and circled her back around to the building wall and stopped, panting, clutching her in his arms. He gave himself a second to catch his breath and to think. He'd reached the end of this mile-long factory of death, and he was still alive, thank God, but he was only just starting to appreciate how truly fucked he was. He was a fast runner. He'd been a long-distance runner in high school, but he couldn't outrun bullets. And by the time the farmers reached the side of the building, he knew one thing: I'd better be somewhere else. And that's when he noticed it. He noticed two things really, and both might work.